260 seconds before my flight, I stood at the gate. My iPhone screen glowed. A single photo sat in my iMessage thread, sent 3 minutes ago. In the picture, Sterling Alden was in the hallway of the most exclusive VIP maternity ward at Mount Sinai in Manhattan. His charcoal Tom Ford suit jacket was draped over one arm. The sleeves of his crisp white dress shirt were rolled to his elbows, revealing the platinum Audemars Piguet watch I'd given him. He was bent slightly at the waist, both hands braced against the doorframe of a delivery room. The lines of his face were taut with tension. His brow creased into a tight knot. It was an expression he only wore under extreme stress. 3 years of marriage, I had seen him scowl. I had seen him smirk with derision. I had seen him turn his head away in annoyance. But I had never, not once, seen him this tense for a woman. Inside that delivery room was Sierra Layton, his high school sweetheart, his first love, the woman he'd held a torch for over a decade. And now, she was giving him a child. Another text came through from Mr. Hayes, Sterling's executive assistant. The tone was cautious. Mrs. Alden, Miss Layton was just taken into the delivery room. They're expecting a natural birth. Mr. Alden is waiting outside. He silenced his phone and asked not to be disturbed by anyone. I read the message and let out a soft, humorless laugh. Not to be disturbed. Today was March 15th, mine and Sterling Alden's 3rd wedding anniversary. When he left our Central Park South penthouse this morning, he didn't even look at me. "I have a dinner meeting tonight. Don't wait up," was all he'd said before grabbing his leather briefcase and walking to the private elevator. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind him, leaving the foyer light on. At that moment, I was standing in the chef's kitchen, personally basting the dry-aged bone-in ribeye he loved. The temperature of the cast iron was perfect. The butter and rosemary sizzled in the pan. The savory aroma filled the dining room. The table was set with raw silk runners, and in the center sat a lush arrangement of white peonies I'd had flown in from a specialty grower in Alaska 3 days ago. I finished resting the steaks, plated them on artisanal stoneware, paired them with a side of brown butter asparagus, and carried them to the table. Then I sat alone for 3 hours. The food grew cold. The peonies bloomed in silence. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the skyline of Manhattan began to glitter one skyscraper at a time. I picked up my phone and opened my thread with Mr. Hayes. "Where is he?" I texted. 3 minutes later, the photo arrived. Delivery room, Sierra Layton, childbirth. The 3 phrases twisted together. Not like a sharp knife, but like a dull, rusty blade plunging slowly into my chest. I put down my silver fork and one by one scraped the food from the table into the stainless steel trash can. The ribeye, the lobster mac and cheese, the wild-caught salmon, the truffle mashed potatoes, all his favorites, all made by me. When I emptied the last plate, the trash bin was full. The kitchen recessed lights were glaringly bright. I stood under them and did not shed a single tear. Then I went upstairs and into my walk-in closet. From the very back of the top shelf, I pulled out a heavy manila envelope. The envelope had been given to me 6 months ago by my attorney, Miss Whitmore. Inside were 7 notarized affidavits, 3 sets of offshore bank transaction records, 2 sets of dashcam video stills, and a signed divorce settlement agreement. On the final page, Sterling Alden's signature line was still blank, but it didn't matter. For the past 6 months, like an outsider observing a siege, I had been calmly and methodically dismantling the fortress I had built myself. We are now commencing the boarding process for Austrian Airlines Flight OS-88 to Vienna. Will all Group 1 passengers please make your way to Gate B-23? The announcement pulled me back to reality. The JFK terminal lighting was harsh, a cold white fluorescent glare pouring down from above. Travelers bustled past me, pulling their Toomey rollers. Some walked with purpose. Others shared reluctant, lingering hugs with those seeing them off. I rose from my seat, took the handle of my own suitcase, and walked toward the gate. The line grew shorter as the people ahead of me scanned their digital boarding passes and disappeared down the jet bridge. It was my turn. I handed my phone to the gate agent. The scanner beeped, a clear, crisp sound. In that exact same moment, my thumb pressed the share button on Instagram. Post successful. I powered down my phone. The shutdown animation was a small spinning wheel before the OLED screen went completely dark. These 3 years needed to go completely dark too. I stepped onto the jet bridge. I did not look back. Behind me, I heard the clear voice of the gate agent over the PA system. Final boarding call for Flight OS 88 to Vienna. Will passenger Harper Alden please board the aircraft immediately? The voice echoed in the enclosed space, growing more distant as I walked. And in that moment, I knew someone's world was collapsing. In the VIP wing of Mount Sinai, Sterling Alden paced anxiously in the corridor outside the delivery room. The sound of his Italian leather Oxfords on the polished floor was a fast, erratic rhythm. Every few seconds, he would look up at the heavy mahogany door, then look down and resume his pacing. Mr. Hayes stood 10 feet away, holding his phone in both hands. His face was the color of chalk. He had refreshed the X trending topics 3 times, then 3 more times. Hashone. Alden Enterprises CEO. Sterling Alden's illegitimate child scandal. #2. Sterling Alden caught at Mistress's childbirth. #3. Harper Alden announces divorce. Each of the 3 topics was followed by a small, fiery red exploding trend icon. Mr. Hayes's hands were trembling. He looked up at Sterling, his lips moving, but no sound came out. Just then, the delivery room door opened. A scrub nurse emerged, holding a baby wrapped in a standard-issue striped receiving blanket. She wore a professional, warm smile. "Mr. Alden, congratulations. Mother and baby are both doing fantastic. It's a boy. 7 pounds, 3 ounces. Sterling stared blankly for a second. Then his face broke into a radiant, unguarded smile. He walked over quickly and carefully took the baby. Looking down at the wrinkled little face, his eyes curved into crescents, filled with an irrepressible joy. "I have a son." He held the baby in his arms, his movements clumsy, but exceptionally gentle. One hand supported the newborn's heavy head, the other cradled the bottom of the blanket. The baby squirmed in his arms, letting out a soft, reedy cry. Sterling turned to his assistant, his smile even wider. "Hayes, look at my son." His voice stopped abruptly. He had seen Mr. Hayes's face. There wasn't a shred of joy on it. He was ashen, looking as if he'd just walked into a morgue. His lips were trembling, the corners of his eyes red. "Hayes." Sterling's brow furrowed. "What is it?" "Mr." Hayes opened his mouth, but his voice was strangled, as if squeezed through a tight fist. "Sir, your phone. Please look at your phone." "What phone? Can't you see?" "I'm holding my son." Sterling turned away in annoyance, his gaze returning to the baby. He gently stroked the baby's tiny fist with his thumb. "Hey there, buddy. Say Dada." "Sir." "Mr." Hayes's voice suddenly rose, cracking with strain. "Mrs. Alden," she posted on Instagram. "She's revealed everything." Sterling's movements froze. He slowly lifted his head. The smile was still on his face, but it was frozen. A grotesque, lifeless mask. "What the hell are you talking about?" "Mr." Hayes held out his phone, the screen facing up, blindingly bright in the dim hallway. Sterling, holding the baby against his chest with one arm, snatched the device with his free hand. The moment his eyes fell on the screen, his pupils contracted violently. Trending Hayes-own. Alden Enterprises CEO Sterling Alden's illegitimate child scandal. Trending #2. Sterling Alden caught at Mistress's childbirth. Trending #3. Harper Alden announces divorce. His fingers began to shake. He tapped on Harper's Instagram profile. 9 photos. The first photo, their New York State marriage license. In the small photo against a neutral background, his expression was stoic and blank. Her eyes and mouth were curved into a joyous, genuine smile. Photos 2 through 7. Various, irrefutable pieces of evidence of his affair with Sierra. A high-res security still of them entering the Baccarat Hotel together. Dashcam footage of them making out in the front seat of his matte black Porsche Panamera. A scanned copy of Sierra's obstetric chart with his name clearly typed under father. And today's photo, a shot of his own back as he waited anxiously outside this very delivery room. The 8th photo. The signature page of the divorce settlement agreement. The 9th photo. A single line of text on a black background. Our 3-year marriage ends today. I wish you well on your own path. Don't look for me. Timestamp. 1 minute ago. The post already had over 150000 shares, 400000 comments, and was rapidly approaching 1 million likes. Sterling's hand trembled so violently he almost dropped the device. When? Since when? Before he could finish the sentence, his own phone in his pocket began to vibrate incessantly. He pulled it out. The screen was lit up with an incoming call. Richard Alden, Chairman. Before he could even swipe to answer, it dropped, and another call came in. Eleanor Alden, Mother. Then a third, a fourth, a fifth members of the board of directors, major Wall Street shareholders, media outlets. The calls came in like a burst dam. The phone vibrated maniacally in his hand, making his palm go numb. Impossible, Sterling muttered, his breathing turning shallow. She couldn't have known. He looked again at the photo of him outside the delivery room on Hayes's phone. The angle was from a secluded waiting alcove at the other end of the hall, a perfect vantage point to capture the entire scene unseen. That angle. He whipped his head around to look at Mr. Hayes, his eyes venomous. Mr. Hayes took a staggering step back, cold sweat beading on his forehead, his lips trembling too much to form a coherent sentence. Sir. Mrs. Alden. Get out of my way. Sterling roughly shoved the baby back into the shocked nurse's arms. The nurse, caught completely off guard, nearly dropped the infant. She cried out, Mr. Alden, as she scrambled to secure the wailing newborn against her scrubs. Sterling had already turned and bolted. His Oxfords clattered sharply on the hospital floor. He shoved open the heavy fire exit door and flew down the concrete stairs, taking them 3 at a time. His knee slammed hard into the metal railing, but the adrenaline erased the pain. There was only one thought screaming in his mind. Harper. Harper cannot leave. As he burst through the hospital's revolving glass doors into the cool Manhattan air, his phone slipped from his sweaty grip and shattered on the concrete pavement. The screen cracked into a spiderweb of jagged lines, but it was still illuminated. Still open to the X trending page where the share count on Harper's post was climbing at a rate of several thousand per second. He didn't stop to pick it up. He sprinted to the valet zone, wrenched open the driver's side door of his Porsche Panamera before the valet could even react, and gunned the engine. The tires left thick black streaks on the pavement as the luxury sedan shot forward into traffic like a bullet. The destination was JFK. The speedometer needle jumped from 0 to 60 inches under 4 seconds. And at that moment, through the oval window of Austrian Airlines Flight OS-88, the sprawling grid of New York City lights was becoming smaller and smaller. Harper Alden leaned back in her lie-flat first-class pod and calmly closed her eyes. Back at the hospital, as Sterling Alden peeled out onto the avenue, Mr. Hayes, panting heavily, jogged out of the entrance. He bent down and picked up the cracked iPhone. On the broken screen, the trending page continued to refresh relentlessly. Harper's post. The shares had already surpassed 5 million, and the comments were rocketing towards 1 million. Mr. Hayes's fingers trembled. He looked up towards the street. He only caught a glimpse of the aggressive red taillights of Sterling's black Porsche flashing once, before disappearing down Fifth Avenue. Upstairs, the nurse stood frozen in front of the delivery room door, holding the crying baby. She looked down at the infant in her arms, then at the empty corridor, murmuring in disbelief. He just left? The delivery room doors swung wide again, and Sierra Layton was wheeled out on a gurney. Her perfectly contoured face was pale, wisps of blonde hair stuck to her forehead with sweat. Her lips were pale from the physical strain, but there was a massive, radiant smile on her face, the triumphant, smug smile of a victor. She had just given birth to Sterling Alden's son. From this day forward, she was the future. She would be Mrs. Alden, the reigning socialite of Alden Enterprises. "Where's Sterling?" Sierra's voice was weak but laced with urgent excitement. She struggled to lift her head, looking around the empty hall. "Where is he? The baby? Did he hold the baby?" The nurse, her expression a mix of pity and deep, uncomfortable confusion, brought the swaddled baby to her. Sierra reached out to take him. Looking at the wrinkled little face, her eyes grew misty. The smile on her lips was impossible to hide. "Oh, baby. Mommy's right here. Daddy. Daddy must be so happy he doesn't even know what to do with himself." No one answered. The corridor was eerily, oppressively quiet. Sierra finally sensed the vacuum in the room. She looked up, her gaze sweeping over the few people present. The nurse's actively evasive eyes. Mr. Bat. Hayes walking back down the hall with an ashen face, and that shattered phone in his hand, its screen still glowing through the cracks. "What is it?" Her tone shifted sharply, the victorious smile slowly melting from her face. "What happened?" "Mr." Hayes took a deep breath, steeling himself, and walked towards her gurney. He handed her the broken phone without a word. The screen was shattered, but the bold black text of the internet was perfectly legible. Trending Hasson. Alden Enterprises CEO Sterling Alden's illegitimate child scandal. Trending #2. Sterling Alden caught at Mistress's childbirth. Trending #3. Harper Alden announces divorce. Sierra's manicured fingers suddenly clenched like claws. The baby fussed uncomfortably against her chest. She frantically tapped on the Instagram icon, navigating to Harper's profile. She scrolled through the 9 photos one by one. The Baccarat Hotel security still. The dashcam footage of them kissing. Her own highly confidential obstetric report, Sterling's name highlighted, and today. Today's photo of Sterling pacing right outside this very door. The timestamp was a mere 20 minutes ago. Who took this? Sierra's voice grew shrill, echoing off the linoleum. Who took this picture? Who sent it to that boring bitch? Mr. Hayes took a step back. His suit collar was drenched in cold sweat. He couldn't speak. Sierra turned her furious gaze on him, her eyes blazing with sudden realization. It was you. You've always hated me. It was you, wasn't it? Miss Layton, Mr. Hayes's voice trembled, offering no real denial. You ungrateful bastard, Sierra shrieked hysterically, her voice bouncing violently down the VIP hall. The baby, startled by the sheer volume, began to wail at the top of his lungs. Do you have any idea how many years it took me to pull this off? Do you have any idea how long I've waited for today? She aggressively struggled to sit upright in the hospital bed. A nurse rushed over to restrain her shoulders gently. Ma'am, please, you just gave birth. Your blood pressure, you need to lie down. Sierra tried to bat the nurse's hand away, but her arm fell limply, her core muscles too exhausted from labor. She gasped for breath, and then hot, furious tears suddenly burst from her eyes, ruining her carefully applied waterproof mascara and streaming down her pale cheeks. She looked down at the baby, screaming in her arms. His little face was red and swollen, tiny fists flailing in the air. Your father is gone. Sierra's voice was suddenly hollow, weightless, as if she were dissociating. He went after her. He didn't even look back at you. He just ran after her. The nurse gently reached down. Ma'am, the baby is highly distressed. Let me take him to the nursery and get him a bottle of formula. Sierra clamped her arms around the baby tighter, her knuckles turning bone white. Her lips trembled as thick tears fell, staining the yellow and blue blanket. Sterling Alden. She spat the name through gritted, perfectly veneered teeth. I gave you a son, and you didn't even hold him for 5 minutes before you ran off like a dog. Fine. Just fine. She suddenly started laughing, a jagged, chilling sound that echoed in the empty corridor, making the hair on Mr. Hayes's arms stand up. You think Harper will take you back? She screamed at the empty double doors, as if projecting to the long-gone Sterling. She dragged my name through the mud and fed yours to the wolves. Sterling, you're finished! Your precious Alden Enterprises is tanking right now. Her voice grew louder and louder, finally turning into a piercing, primal scream that filled the entire floor. The nurses exchanged panicked glances. The charge nurse quietly stepped away and paged the resident psychiatrist on duty. The sound of the newborn's frantic cries, Sierra's unhinged screams, and the incessant buzzing of the broken phone all mixed into a chaotic, toxic symphony. Mr. Hayes retreated to a dark corner near the elevators, wiping the sweat from his brow with a monogrammed handkerchief. He discreetly pulled out his personal phone and checked a message on Signal. It was from Miss Whitmore, Harper's high-powered attorney. It contained only 4 words. Mission accomplished. Funds transferred. He quietly deleted the message, locked his phone, and slipped it into his breast pocket. At that exact moment, on the Van Wyck Expressway, 15 miles from the hospital, Sterling's matte black Porsche weaved madly through the evening traffic. The digital speedometer glowed red. 95 miles per hour. His hands gripped the leather steering wheel, knuckles white, the thick blue veins on the back of his forearms pulsing with pure adrenaline. Cars blurred into streaks of light behind him. Horns blared aggressively from all directions. A guy in an F-150 rolled down his window and shouted an obscenity at him. Sterling didn't even register it. His Prada loafer was pressing the gas pedal into the floorboards. Harper. He ground the name between his teeth like glass. 3 years. For 3 years, she had been a silent, decorative fixture by his side. She never argued with him about his late nights, never cried in front of him. Even when he treated her with icy corporate indifference, she would just quietly move aside, pouring herself a glass of water, reading a book. He honestly thought she didn't care. He thought this marriage was just a high-society business transaction for her too, orchestrated by their families. But today she had taken his pristine reputation, Alden Enterprises' legacy, and thrown it into a wood chipper in front of tens of millions of people, then poured gasoline on the remains. His phone was shattered back at Mount Sinai, but the Porsche's Apple CarPlay dashboard screen was still synced to his iCloud. Notifications kept popping up on the wide touchscreen. Impossible to ignore. CNBC alert. Alden Enterprises. ALDN. Stock plummets 12% in after-hours trading. Calendar alert. Emergency board meeting called. Richard Alden, Dad. 37 missed calls. Eleanor Alden, Mom. 21 missed calls. He aggressively swiped the screen off. He didn't want to see it. He didn't give a damn about the board right now. All he wanted to know was what airline Harper was on, what time the flight took off, and where the hell she was going. When he had sprinted out of the hospital, he'd glanced at the timestamp on her Instagram post. 6:47 p.m. The dashboard clock now read 6:53 p.m. 6 minutes. He had only been chasing her for 6 minutes. Sterling jerked the wheel hard to the right. The wide sports sedan squeezed between 2 Amazon Prime semi-trucks. The space between his carbon fiber mirror and the truck on the right was inches. The truck driver laid on his air horn, a massive blast that vibrated the Porsche's windows. He didn't care. Only one vivid image replayed on an endless loop in his mind. This morning, as he was leaving for the office, Harper was in the kitchen, her back to him, searing steaks. She was wearing a simple, elegant ivory cashmere lounge set. Her dark hair was loosely pinned up with a single claw clip, revealing the delicate, pale nape of her neck. The butter sizzled in the pan, and the rich, homey aroma filled the cold, modern architecture of their penthouse. He had paused for a fraction of a second as he passed the kitchen island. She had turned, given him a soft, almost imperceptible smile, and asked, "Will you be home for dinner?" He had adjusted his Rolex and said, "I have a meeting." The smile on her face had faltered for a microsecond before she forced it back into a polite mask. She nodded. "Okay, drive safe." And he had walked out to the private elevator. As the heavy doors closed, he thought he heard her murmur something soft under her breath. He hadn't caught it. He hadn't cared enough to ask her to repeat it. Now, like a delayed shockwave, the memory hit him. She had said, "It's our anniversary, Sterling." She had said it was their anniversary. Today was March 15th. Sterling's hand trembled so violently the heavy car swerved across the dotted white line, nearly sideswiping the concrete median. He had forgotten. She had remembered. She had always remembered. He hadn't even checked his calendar for personal dates. All his brain had space for was that Sierra's due date was approaching, that he had to have his driver on standby for the hospital today, that his high school flame was giving him a son. He had even been arrogantly thinking, while pacing outside the delivery room, that once the baby was born and settled, he would finally go home, sit Harper down in the study, and have a civilized talk. Hand her a massive settlement check, the deed to a house in the Hamptons, and end things gracefully. Instead, she had executed him on a public stage. Sterling slammed the heel of his hand into the steering wheel in a fit of rage and panic. The Porsche's horn blared a long, aggressive note down the expressway. "Harper!" he roared into the empty, leather-scented cabin. "You stay right there!" The car surged forward. Finally, the massive green reflective signs for the airport appeared overhead. JFK International Airport, all terminals, 2 miles. He floored the accelerator. The speed of the black Panamera on the airport connector was pushing 105 miles per hour. Sterling's eyes were bloodshot and fixed on the road ahead, his hands strangling the wheel. His palms were slick with sweat. The automatic climate control was blasting AC, but the back of his bespoke shirt was soaked, sticking uncomfortably to the leather racing seat. The only thing echoing in his mind was the image of Harper in the kitchen, her back to him, the ivory cashmere, the loosely pinned hair, the nape of her neck, and those quiet words. "It's our anniversary." Sterling clenched his jaw, the muscle ticking like a time bomb. The car's dashboard screen kept flashing with relentless notifications. He had turned off the visual display, but he couldn't mute the system chimes without his phone. Every few seconds, it pricked at his frayed nerves. Ding. Bloomberg. ALDN stock down 15%. Ding. Missed call. Arthur Mills, lead board director. Ding. Richard Alden. 42. Missed calls. Ding. New voicemail. Eleanor Alden. His hand spasmed as he swerved onto the exit ramp, and he accidentally tapped the play button on the steering wheel controls. His mother's voice, sharp enough to cut diamonds and dripping with aristocratic venom, erupted from the Burmester surround sound speakers. "Sterling, have you completely lost your goddamn mind? Can't you see the entire country is laughing at the Alden name? Your father's blood pressure just spiked to 220. We had to call an ambulance to the boardroom. Where the hell are you? Get back to the office, right now." The message ended. The car was silent, save for the roar of the engine. Not even 3 seconds later. Ding. Another voicemail. Eleanor again. This time, her tone wasn't screaming. It was low, laced with a terrifying, absolute fury that radiated through the speakers. "Son, let me ask you just one thing. That child, that trashy influencer's child, is he actually yours?" Sterling didn't answer the empty air. His manic gaze was locked on the road. The massive architectural outline of Terminal 4 was coming into view. The sprawling glass and steel building glowed in the night, a dense hub of international departures. The GPS navigation announced, Arriving at JFK International Airport, Terminal 4 departures. He didn't tap the brakes as he hit the elevated ramp. The low-profile tires screeched violently on the curve, the heavy chassis leaning hard. Centrifugal force pinned him against the driver's side door. He didn't let up. The illuminated Terminal 4 Airlines AZ signs were blindingly bright. 6:59 p.m. Exactly 12 minutes since Harper's Instagram post went live. Sterling slammed on the carbon ceramic brakes, the car screeching to a violently abrupt halt right at the curbside check-in zone, angled aggressively across 2 lanes. The tires let out one final piercing squeal against the concrete. Before the car had even settled on its suspension, he threw open the door and sprinted. "Hey! Sir!" A TSA curbside agent, startled, rushed toward the idling vehicle. "Sir, you absolutely cannot park here. It's a tow zone." Sterling shoved the agent's outstretched arm aside like it was nothing and sprinted through the automatic sliding doors into the terminal, not looking back once. The departure hall of Terminal 4 was a cavernous, brightly lit sea of humanity. A massive digital flight information board spanned the ceiling, a dense, dizzying grid of yellow text constantly flipping and changing. Travelers pulled hard-shell suitcases. People queued endlessly at the Delta and international check-in counters. An automated voice echoed through the vast space. Austrian Airlines Flight OS-88 to Vienna is now in the final boarding process. All remaining passengers must report to the gate. Sterling stood dead in the middle of the crowded hall, chest heaving, gasping for air. He had left his suit jacket in the car. His white dress shirt was wrinkled and rolled to the elbows. His silk tie was yanked loose and askew. His usually impeccably styled hair was a wild mess from running his hands through it. He looked like a cornered, desperate animal, eyes bloodshot, breathing ragged. People around him began to pause and stare. Someone in the TSA line pointed. "Holy shit, isn't that the guy from Alden Enterprises?" "Yeah, the CEO trending on X right now." "The cheating husband. What's he doing here? I thought the post said he was at the hospital with the Mistress." "Dude. Get your phone out. Record this." Smartphones were hoisted into the air. Camera lenses zoomed in on his frantic face. Sterling didn't even notice them. His crazed eyes frantically scanned the giant departure board. 6 p.m., 7 p.m. Vienna. He found it. OS-88. Dest. Vienna. Vi. Shed departure. 7:05 p.m. Gate B-23. Status: boarding. Boarding. The word hit his retinas, and his heart felt like it was injected with pure adrenaline. There was still a chance. She was still on U.S. soil. She hadn't left yet. He broke into a dead sprint. From the main departure hall to Gate B-23, he had to bypass standard security. He vaulted the rope of the TSA pre-check line, flashed his clear biometric pass, shoved his way through the metal detectors, ignoring the yelling agents, and bolted down the long, duty-free concourse. It was a solid 15-minute walk at a brisk pace. Sterling ran it like a track star. His leather shoes pounded mercilessly on the terrazzo floor, a heavy, desperate thud echoing over the ambient airport noise. He physically shoved past slow-walking tourists, hip-checked a rolling luggage cart, and knocked over a standing cardboard advertisement for Chanel perfume. The sign crashed to the floor, and a woman screamed in surprise. "Sorry. Move! Out of the way!" His voice was hoarse, a metallic taste of blood pooling in the back of his throat. The illuminated sign for Gate B-23 finally came into view. 200 feet. 100 feet. 50 feet. He burst into the gate seating area, chest heaving violently, and his momentum came to a crashing, sudden halt. Gate B-23 was completely empty. A single gate agent was neatly stacking boarding passes at the counter, preparing to close out the flight. Hearing the heavy, ragged breathing, she looked up, startled to see a disheveled, sweat-soaked man in luxury business wear standing there. "Sir? Can I help you?" Sterling's voice was a desperate, breathless shout. The flight to Vienna. I need to get on. My wife. The agent stared for a moment, her eyes darting to his lack of luggage, then glanced down at her computer screen before looking back at him with a mixture of professional courtesy and mild pity. I'm sorry, sir. Boarding for flight OS-88 is officially closed. Sterling staggered back a half step, as if she had just hit him in the sternum with a baseball bat. No. No, that's impossible. The board out front said boarding. The agent pointed a manicured finger to the digital screen directly above her head. He slowly looked up. The glowing green text for OS-88 had just blinked and switched from boarding to a harsh, red gate closed. The digital clock read exactly 19. The aircraft cabin door was sealed 2 minutes ago. The agent's voice was polite but firm, laced with the finality of aviation protocol. The jet bridge is retracting now. They will be pushing back shortly. I'm very sorry, but federal regulations state you cannot board. Sterling stood frozen to the commercial carpet. The small crowd of people who had recognized him and followed him from the security checkpoint now arrived, panting and holding their iPhones high. Cameras were trained on his back. They whispered aggressively. They live-streamed to TikTok. They laughed out loud. Oh my God, he missed it. Karma's a bitch, bro. Too late to play the good husband now. I'm live, guys. Clip this. The billionaire CEO airport sprint. This is better than reality TV. Sterling suddenly spun around, his eyes wild, shoved aggressively past the gawkers, and ran to the massive floor-to-ceiling glass wall of the terminal concourse. Outside, the tarmac was lit up by massive floodlights. A massive Boeing 777 bearing the Austrian Airlines livery was slowly being pushed back from the gate by a yellow tug vehicle. The red and white tail fins stood out starkly against the dark sky. The flight number OS-88 was digitally assigned to the bay. Sterling slammed both palms flat against the cold, reinforced glass, all the strength in his legs seeming to drain out of him in a rush. He could do absolutely nothing but watch as the massive plane detached from the tug, its massive engines spooling up with a low, vibrating roar, and turned slowly towards the active taxiway, getting further and further away. The strobe lights on the Boeing's wingtips blinked rhythmically, like cold, mocking eyes winking at him in the darkness. Harper. His forehead fell forward, touching the cold glass. His hot, ragged breath fogged the surface. His phone was in pieces in a hospital driveway. His multi-million-dollar company's stock was cratering by the minute. His father was likely having a heart attack because of his public humiliation. His mistress was sitting in a VIP suite realizing she had lost her golden ticket. And he was standing here, publicly humiliated, watching his wife's plane taxi to the runway, utterly powerless to stop it. Someone approached quietly from behind. The footsteps were soft, stopping a respectful distance away. Sir. It was Mr. Hayes' voice. Sterling didn't even turn his head. Mr. Hayes reached out, holding a brand new iPhone in his palm. The screen was illuminated, displaying an active call. The caller ID read, Anya Whitmore. Esquire, it's Miss Whitmore. Mrs. Alden's attorney, Mr. Hayes, said cautiously, anticipating an explosion. She says she has a message for you. Sterling slowly turned his head, his dead eyes falling on the glowing screen. He took the phone with a trembling hand and pressed it to his ear. An unfamiliar woman's voice, hyper-professional to the point of being robotic, came through the speaker. Mr. Alden, good evening. My name is Anya Whitmore. I am the legal counsel representing Miss Harper Alden. My client has granted me full power of attorney regarding all matters pertaining to the dissolution of your marriage. The relevant filings will be served to the Alden Enterprises Legal Department tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp. Miss Whitmore paused for a calculated beat. And my client asked me to pass along a personal message. Sterling's grip on the phone tightened until the plastic case creaked. What is it? There was no waver, no emotion in the lawyer's voice. She said that for 3 years, she cooked dinner for you every night, but you never once sat down for a proper meal. She said she threw out the dry-aged ribeye she made for your anniversary tonight. And she wanted you to know that from now on, you will never get to eat it again, even if you begged on your hands and knees. Click. The line went dead. The standard AT&T dial tone buzzed flatly in his ear. Sterling's arm slowly dropped to his side, the phone hanging loosely in his fingers. Outside the massive window, Flight OS 88 lined up on the runway, the engines roaring to full takeoff thrust. The heavy aircraft sped down the tarmac, lifted its nose gracefully, and soared upward into the New York night sky. The blinking lights on its tail grew smaller and smaller, until they were entirely swallowed by the dense cloud cover. He stood at the window like a hollowed-out mannequin. Behind him, the crowd of onlookers was still filming. The chat overlays on their TikTok and Instagram live streams were scrolling at a manic, unreadable pace. Did he catch her? Nope. Plane's long gone, laugh my ass off. This is priceless. Lost his perfect wife. Lost his company. Girls, let's spam good for her in the chat. Sterling couldn't hear them. All his brain could process was the echo of the lawyer's final sentence playing on a loop. You will never get to eat it again, even if you begged on your hands and knees. He closed his eyes and leaned his entire weight against the cold airport glass. It's our anniversary, Sterling. She had said it. He had heard her. And he had walked into the elevator anyway. The crowd in the concourse was actually growing as TSA agents failed to disperse them. Dozens of smartphones formed a dense, glowing thicket, all lenses aimed squarely at the broken man by the window. Someone had even monetized their stream. Animated GIFs, digital roses, gold coins, cowboy hats exploded across their screens. Look closely, chat. This is the billionaire CEO of Alden Enterprises himself. Just ran a whole 5K through JFK only to watch his wife fly away. Laugh my ass off. Bro was acting so tough when his side piece was giving birth. Now look at him crying by a window. Harper is a absolute queen. Take half his net worth, girl. Noel. He is fine as hell, though, in that suit. Toxic but fine. Sterling blocked out the ambient noise of the airport. He just stood there, staring out at the empty, dark runway where Flight OS 88 had vanished. All that remained were a few faint stars and the blue taxiway guidelights. Mr. Hayes stood 10 feet behind him, completely at a loss for protocol. He nervously adjusted his tie, glancing at Sterling's rigid back, then at the growing crowd of amateur paparazzi. The sweat on his forehead was turning cold. He took a hesitant half-step forward and lowered his voice so the streamers couldn't hear. Sir, there are too many people here. Airport police are on their way. We need to leave. The Panamera is still idling at the departure curb. The Port Authority said they'll impound it if we don't move it right now. Sterling didn't flinch. Mr. Hayes gritted his teeth, knowing he was about to drop a bomb, and stepped closer. Sir, the chairman's office just called my backup line. Your father collapsed in the boardroom. His blood pressure hit 230. Paramedics are working on him right now. Your mother said if you don't come back immediately, she's having security lock you out of the building. Those words pierced the thick fog in Sterling's brain like an ice pick. His broad shoulders trembled slightly. Finally, a physical reaction. He slowly, mechanically turned around to face the terminal. The crowd collectively gasped and stirred, phones raising higher. He's turning around! Oh my God! Look at his face. His eyes are totally red. Bro is absolutely destroyed. Sterling's eyes were indeed red. Not just from crying, but from blood vessels that had violently burst from the sheer spike in blood pressure, covering the whites of his eyes in a fine, jagged red web. He looked dry, burnt out, and completely devoid of life. His designer hair was plastered to his forehead with nervous sweat. His bespoke shirt was wrinkled beyond repair. The untouchable CEO of Alden Enterprises, the youngest, most ruthlessly successful golden boy of Wall Street, now looked like a stray dog that had been dragged behind a truck. He raised a heavy hand and slowly pushed his hair back from his face. And then, he did something that silenced the entire concourse. He knelt, both knees hit the cold, hard terrazzo floor of Terminal 4 with a dull, heavy thud. The ambient chatter of the crowd died instantly. Even the relentless live chat on the stream seemed to freeze in shock. Mr. Hayes froze mid-step, his jaw practically hitting the floor. Sterling knelt directly facing the vast glass window, staring out at the empty tarmac and the inky black sky. His back was rigidly straight, his arms hanging dead at his sides, his hands clenched into tight fists, his knuckles glowing white. He said absolutely nothing. Not a single word, not a sob, not an excuse. But everyone in the room intuitively understood. He wasn't kneeling for the cameras. He wasn't kneeling for PR or for the prying eyes of the internet. He was kneeling for the Boeing 777 that had already crossed into international airspace. He was kneeling for the woman sitting in first class, the woman he had treated like high-end furniture for 3 years. He was kneeling for the ruined anniversary dinner sitting in a stainless steel trash can, for the quiet, soft words he had ignored that morning. "Are you getting this?" Someone whispered frantically in the dead silence. "Keep recording." This is insane. The live chats violently exploded back to life. He is on his knees. So what? A fake apology doesn't erase 3 years of cheating. Don't fall for the manipulation tactics, ladies. Men only cry when they lose their toys. Damn. He actually looks like his soul left his body. Didn't look so broken when he was knocking up the influencer, did he? Sterling knelt on the hard floor for 3 agonizingly long minutes. Then, he stood up. The movement was incredibly slow, stiff, as if his joints had rusted shut. His tall frame swayed dangerously once before he found his balance. He didn't make eye contact with a single person in the crowd. He walked straight toward Mr. Elablay. Hayes and wordlessly took the new iPhone from his assistant's hand. The screen was still unlocked. It showed over 99 unread notifications, all from one account, Harper Alden. But they weren't messages she had just sent to him. They were a folder of screenshots Mr. Hayes had quietly compiled from Harper's private close friends Instagram account, a burner Finsta Sterling hadn't even known existed until now. 3 years. 3 years of digital archives, all centered entirely around him. The first post, 3 years ago, March 15th. A photo of a manicured hand holding a crystal coupe of vintage champagne, with a blurred background of the penthouse living room scattered with rose petals. Caption: Newlyweds. Can't wait to build a life together. She had just married him. In the reflection of the glass, her eyes were bright, full of naive, unfiltered hope. The second post. June of that year. A photo of a plate of severely burnt, unrecognizable steak. Caption: First time trying to make his favorite dry-aged ribeye. Total disaster. He told me not to worry and just ordered us Nobu. But I saw him smiling when he looked at the burnt pan. Need to practice more. The third post. Thanksgiving that year. A photo of a massive, gorgeously styled dining table laden with a Michelin-level spread. Caption: Cooked the entire Thanksgiving spread myself today. He was on business calls all day, but he finally came out and took one bite of the stuffing. Just one bite. But he ate it. The fourth post. Winter of that year. No photo, just text on a beige background. Caption: He caught the flu today. Canceled all his meetings. I spent 4 hours making my grandmother's home-style chicken noodle soup from scratch. He took one spoonful, pushed the bowl away, said it tasted like water, and told Hayes to order him pho from down the street. He didn't eat the pho either. I sat at the island and ate the whole pot of soup. It wasn't bland at all. Really. The 5th. The 6th. The 7th. Sterling scrolled through them one by one, his thumb swiping upward in a daze. His large hands trembled worse with every swipe. Under every post, there were comments. Lighthearted jokes from her college sorority sisters, sympathetic emojis from her best friend, polite encouragement from acquaintances. But Harper had never replied to a single comment. She was just using the app as a digital diary, quietly, privately recording the timeline of a marriage that only she was actively trying to keep alive. The second-to-last post was dated exactly 6 months ago. A stark black and white photo of the embossed cover page of a New York State divorce settlement agreement. No caption. The final post was from today. 6:04 p.m. No photo, no text. Just a single Apple Maps location tag. JFK International Airport, Terminal 4. Directly below the tag, the app had automatically calculated the distance from the penthouse to Vienna, Austria. 4,225 miles. Sterling stared blankly at that specific number, and then a sound tore its way out of his throat. He started to laugh. The sound was ragged, hoarse, and bone-dry, infinitely more painful to listen to than a man sobbing. He laughed, the harsh sound vibrating in his chest, and the corners of his bloodshot eyes burned like acid. He laughed, and the hand clutching the iPhone shook so violently it blurred the screen. He laughed until he physically doubled over, clutching his stomach like a man who had just taken a bullet to the gut. 4,225 miles, he whispered to the floor, his voice cracking, barely audible over the airport hum. You put yourself in exile. An ocean away, just to get far enough away from me. Mr. Hayes stood paralyzed beside him, completely unequipped for this level of emotional collapse. He could only bow his head in extreme discomfort and pretend to study the scuff marks on the floor tiles. Sterling finally straightened up, his face a terrifyingly blank slate. He handed the phone back to Mr. Hayes without looking at him. His eyes were blood red, completely devoid of moisture. He hadn't shed a single tear. "Let's go," he rasped. Just those 2 words. And turned to walk toward the terminal exit doors. The crowd instinctively parted for him like the Red Sea, intimidated by the sheer, cold emptiness radiating from him. The smartphone cameras followed his back all the way out to the chilly departure curb. Sterling's Panamera was still parked diagonally across the lanes, the driver's side door hanging wide open, the engine humming aggressively, the key fob still in the console. A Port Authority police officer was standing by the bumper, radio in hand, calling in a tow truck. Seeing Sterling approach, the officer puffed out his chest, ready for a confrontation. "Sir, is this your vehicle? You are in direct violation of." Sterling didn't even break stride. He pulled his slim Tom Ford wallet from his slacks, pulled out a thick stack of $100 bills, at least $2,000, and shoved it directly into the stunned officer's hands. "Have it towed. Impound it. Crush it. I don't give a damn," Sterling said in a dead voice. With that, he yanked open the rear passenger door and climbed into the back seat, collapsing against the plush black leather and closing his eyes. Mr. Hayes, panicking, quickly flashed his corporate ID at the bewildered cop, scrambled into the driver's seat, threw the Porsche into drive, and carefully navigated away from the chaotic curb of Terminal 4. The crowd on the sidewalk behind them was still filming the taillights, the live chat still moving at light speed. But Sterling was completely checked out. He leaned his head against the tinted glass, his eyes shut tight against the passing yellow glow of the highway streetlights. The lights flickered rhythmically across his exhausted face, painting him in alternating stripes of light and deep shadow. His lips moved slightly. Mr. Hayes glanced nervously in the rearview mirror, straining his ears, but he couldn't hear what the CEO was whispering to himself. In the quiet hum of the luxury cabin, Sterling was speaking to a ghost. "It's our anniversary, Sterling." He had finally heard it loud and clear, but the woman who said it was currently 30,000 feet in the air, 4,225 miles away, on a one-way flight across the Atlantic. Mount Sinai, VIP maternity wing. Sierra Layton lay rigidly in her adjustable hospital bed, staring blankly at the acoustic ceiling tiles. The baby had been taken to the nursery by a visibly judging nurse, leaving her completely alone in the massive suite. The IV line in her arm dripped a steady dose of saline, and the heart monitor beside her bed beeped in a slow, depressing rhythm. She had been frozen in this exact position for nearly 40 minutes. Ever since Sterling had sprinted out the door, ever since she had screamed herself entirely hoarse, hurled her silk pillows at the wall, and violently smashed the glass water pitcher from her bedside table onto the floor. The shattered glass was still there. No one had come in to sweep it up. She had finally fallen silent. A toxic, brewing silence. Her rose gold iPhone lay beside her pillow, placed face down. She didn't have the mental fortitude to flip it over. She didn't have the courage to open the X app, to see the trending topics, the TikTok stitches, the Instagram comments, to see exactly how tens of millions of people were currently dissecting her life. Mistress. Homewrecker. Gold digger. Clout chaser. She knew the exact vocabulary they would use without having to read a single comment. But in all her meticulously calculated planning, she had never, for 1 second, imagined that the person who would pull the pin on this grenade would be Harper Alden. Harper. In Sierra's mind, that woman had always been nothing more than a faint, boring shadow, a pathetic placeholder. In the 3 years she was married to Sterling, Harper rarely attended the high-profile Manhattan galas. She never chased the paparazzi or hired a publicist. Even at Alden Enterprises' lavish holiday parties, she barely mingled, preferring to stand quietly by the bar. When Page 6 managed to photograph her, she was always looking down, walking a step behind Sterling, wearing understated, quiet luxury clothes. She was like a wisp of smoke that could easily be blown away. Sierra had never considered her a legitimate threat. What right did a woman from a quiet, boring family, with decent but unremarkable looks and a completely submissive personality, have to hold the title of Mrs. Sterling Alden? She, Sierra Layton, was the one who practically grew up with Sterling at their elite prep school. She was the first girl he ever took to an Ivy League formal, the name he drunkenly texted when he was at Wharton. The position, the penthouse, the black card, it all should have been hers by right. So, she had played the long game. She had been incredibly patient. She had schemed slowly and carefully, drawing Sterling back into her orbit. 3 years of accidental run-ins at exclusive members-only clubs, late-night emergency calls, and carefully curated lingerie selfies sent by mistake. Last June, she finally secured the bag. She got pregnant. The morning the clear blue test showed a solid plus sign, she had stood in the mirror of her Tribeca loft and smiled like a predator for 10 minutes straight. With an Alden air in her stomach, Sterling legally couldn't walk away. The Alden family legacy demanded a male heir, but she had fundamentally miscalculated. Harper wasn't smoke. Harper was a razor-sharp blade that had been quietly resting in a velvet sheath for 3 years. When a blade is sheathed, no one respects its edge. Once it is drawn, it slices so fast you don't even realize you're bleeding until you hit the floor. The heavy door to the VIP suite clicked open. A nurse stepped in holding the swaddled baby, a highly cautious, defensive look on her face. Miss Layton. The baby has been given a bottle and burped. He's sleeping quite soundly now in the nursery, but protocol says I should ask if you'd like to do skin-to-skin contact. Sierra slowly rolled her head to the side. Her cold blue eyes fell on the tiny bundle. Her son, the ultimate bargaining chip she had carried for 10 grueling months, sacrificing her figure and enduring 8 hours of labor for. She weakly held out her arms. The nurse handed him over hesitantly and stepped back. The baby's face was still scrunched, red and swollen from delivery. His eyes were squeezed shut, his tiny mouth slightly parted. Breathing softly, Sierra looked down at the infant, and her eyes suddenly pooled with hot tears. "Your father bailed on us," she whispered, her voice rough as sandpaper. "The day you were born. The exact hour. Your father chased another woman to the airport. The baby slept peacefully, completely unaware of the empire collapsing around him. He didn't even want to hold you," she hissed bitterly. "He shoved you at a stranger and ran away. Like tossing out a piece of trash." The nurse stood rigidly by the door, incredibly uncomfortable, unsure if she should intervene. Just then, the heavy double doors swung open aggressively. This time, it wasn't hospital staff. It was Eleanor Alden, Sterling's mother. the vice chairwoman of Alden Enterprises, the notoriously ruthless, terrifying matriarch of Manhattan's old money elite. She strode in wearing a sharply tailored, dark navy Carolina Herrera suit. Her silver hair perfectly blown out, her makeup immaculate and severe, looking exactly as if she were about to ruthlessly fire an entire executive board. But her eyes, the exact same icy blue eyes as Sterling's betrayed the pristine facade. They were burning with a concentrated nuclear rage that was seconds from detonating. Two massive, suited private security contractors from the Alden payroll followed silently behind her, blocking the doorway. Seeing her, Sierra instinctively curled her shoulders inward, clutching the baby to her chest defensively. "Eleanor, do not ever address me by my first name." Eleanor's voice was as cold and sharp as a scalpel. "You absolutely do not have the right." She walked to the edge of the hospital bed, the click of her Louboutin heels sounding like gunshots on the linoleum. She stared down her patrician nose at Sierra. Her gaze was like a physical weight, moving from Sierra's tear-stained face, down to the baby, and back up again. "The child," Sierra said quickly, nervously biting her lip. "It's Sterling's." "I swear it is." "Are you absolutely certain?" "I'm certain." "Look at him." Eleanor was silent for 3 suffocating seconds. Then, without warning, she reached out and aggressively yanked back the hospital blanket wrapped around the baby. Sierra yelped and recoiled. "What the hell are you doing?" Eleanor completely ignored her, leaning in and studying the sleeping newborn's facial features with the clinical detachment of a jeweler inspecting a flawed diamond. His brow ridge, the slope of his nose, the shape of his jawline. Then, she casually tossed the blanket back over him and straightened her posture. "He has a bit of the Alden jaw in him. I will concede that." Her voice was completely devoid of warmth. "But frankly, what does it matter? An illegitimate bastard child born to a social climber will never, under any circumstances, be entered into the Alden family trust." Sierra's face drained of all color, turning a sickly gray. "Mrs. Alden." "Sterling. Sterling promised me." "Promised you what exactly?" Eleanor cut her off, her voice suddenly rising in volume, echoing off the walls. "That he would divorce his wife and marry you? That he would welcome an Instagram influencer into our dining room? Sierra, are you clinically delusional? Do you comprehend what kind of institution the Alden family is? And who exactly are you? A woman who's been passed around yacht parties from Miami to Monaco, who has illegitimate payout checks scattered across the country. And you dared to dream you could force your way into my family?" Sierra physically trembled, her heart hammering against her ribs. "What? What are you talking about?" Eleanor let out a short, terrifying laugh and snapped her fingers. The security guard on her right stepped forward and handed her a thick, legally bound manila folder. Eleanor tossed it onto the bed sheets, right in front of Sierra. "Read it for yourself. Your filthy, heavily redacted past." "The internet moves fast, Sierra. But our corporate intelligence division moves faster." They dug it all up in under an hour. With badly shaking hands, Sierra pulled the heavy folder into her lap and flipped it open. The first document was a heavily sealed NDA and child support agreement from a Silicon Valley tech billionaire, outlining a multi-million-dollar payout for a daughter Sierra had quietly given birth to in California in 2018. The second document was a private settlement agreement with a Miami real estate developer hush money to bury a scandal regarding a pregnancy termination. The third document was a civil court summons filed in Texas. The plaintiff was the wealthy wife of a hedge fund manager, suing Sierra for defamation and civil extortion. 3 highly confidential legal documents. 3 massive financial payouts. 3 different high-net-worth men. Sierra's hands shook so violently the heavy papers slipped from her grasp, scattering across the sterile white blankets. "Fake," she whispered, her eyes darting frantically. "These are fabricated. This is Harper's doing. She paid someone to Photoshop this to ruin me." "Fabricated?" Eleanor's laugh was devoid of any humor. The federal docket numbers on these documents are fully verifiable in the court system as of an hour ago. The internet sleuths found the breadcrumbs, and my lawyers bought the unsealed files. You seem to drastically underestimate the Alden Enterprises legal team, little girl. Sierra opened her mouth to scream a denial, but her throat clamped shut. The baby in her arms, disturbed by the tension in the room, stirred and let out a soft, whimpering cry. Eleanor's icy gaze snapped back down to the infant. She stared at him for a long, heavy moment. Her expression was highly complex, a mix of deep disgust and calculating pragmatism. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was lower now, but the absolute chill in it was freezing. Alden Enterprises will take custody of the child immediately, following a verified independent DNA test. If he is scientifically confirmed to carry Sterling's bloodline, we will raise him in a private estate in Connecticut with a team of nannies. She paused, leaning down so her face was inches from Sierra's. But you will never set foot in our zip code. The child you just birthed will be told you are a surrogate. You will be absolutely nothing to him for the rest of his life. With that, Eleanor simply reached out and firmly scooped the baby out of Sierra's weakened arms. No. Sierra snapped out of her shock, thrashing wildly in the bed, trying to lunge forward to grab the blanket. Don't touch him. He's my son. I birthed him. You legally can't do this. She had just been through labor. Her core strength was non-existent. The two massive security guards stepped forward instantly, firmly pinning her shoulders back against the mattress with effortless strength. Give him back! Sierra shrieked, her voice tearing her vocal cords. Eleanor adjusted the baby in her arms, turned her back and walked toward the door, pausing for just a second without looking over her shoulder. You gave birth to him, yes. And while you were pushing him out, his father was publicly begging his actual wife to stay. While you were giving birth, the entire country labeled you a gold-digging whore on Twitter. While you were giving birth, the Alden Enterprises market cap evaporated by $5 billion. Your very existence brought this innocent child nothing but public shame from the absolute first second he drew breath. We are doing him a favor. The heavy wooden doors swung shut. The sharp click of Eleanor's heels receded rapidly down the linoleum hallway, taking the faint sound of the baby's cries with it. Sierra was left pinned flat against the mattress by the guards, her arms still outstretched toward the empty door. Her lips trembled violently as hot, pathetic tears poured freely from her eyes, soaking into the hospital pillowcase. The guards let go of her and silently backed out of the room, closing the door behind them. Sterling Alden. She squeezed the name from her throat, the sound like tearing fabric. Sterling Alden! Her unhinged screams echoed through the sterile VIP wing for a long time. As of tonight, the House of Cards had completely collapsed. Sterling had abandoned her. The Alden family had legally hijacked her child, and her heavily guarded, scandalous past was currently being dissected by millions of teenagers on TikTok. And the sole architect of this total destruction was Harper Alden, the quiet, boring wife she had laughed at for 3 years. Sierra's piercing screams slowly deteriorated into ugly, gasping sobs, and eventually, the sobs stopped altogether. She lay flat on the bed, her eyes wide open, staring blankly at the ceiling tiles just as she had been an hour ago. Except this time, her blue eyes were completely, terrifyingly empty. Austrian Airlines Flight OS-88. First-class cabin. Harper leaned back against the plush leather headrest of her pod, a crystal flute of vintage Dom Perignon resting lightly in her hand. The golden liquid gently swirled with the motion of the aircraft, tiny bubbles rising in a steady, energetic stream to pop at the surface. She didn't take a sip. She just watched the bubbles. Outside the oval window, the dense layer of transatlantic clouds looked like a silver ocean bathed in cold moonlight. It was vast, silent, and completely serene. A flight attendant in a crisp red uniform approached quietly. "Excuse me, Mrs. Alden. Would you like me to convert your seat into the lie-flat bed for the evening?" Harper shook her head, a polite smile touching her lips. "No, thank you. I don't think I'll be sleeping much tonight." "Very well. Please press the call button if you need absolutely anything. The attendant retreated to the galley. Harper set the champagne flute down on the polished wood tray table and reached into her Celine tote bag, pulling out her iPhone. It had been powered down for hours. The metal casing felt cold and heavy in her palm. Her thumb hovered over the side button. She pressed and held it. The screen illuminated with the white Apple logo. A few seconds later, her custom lock screen appeared. The sheer volume of notifications made her perfectly arched eyebrows rise. 137 missed calls. iMessage. 99 plus unread. News alerts. 42. She opened the iMessage app first. The most recent text was delivered at 1:22 a.m. Eastern Time. It was from Sterling. Harper, where the hell are you? No punctuation. The second message, 1:23 a.m. Answer your phone. The third, 2:04 a.m. Please. The fourth, 2:05 a.m. Harper. Just her name. Harper's thumb paused over the screen. In 3 years of living in the same penthouse, Sterling had rarely called her just Harper in text. It was always a transactional demand or a formal Harper, I need you to. When they were first married, he would slip up and call her by her maiden name, Harper Ellis, at corporate events. This was the first time his text felt stripped of all corporate armor. Just her name. She smiled faintly, a genuine but cynical expression, and didn't reply. She kept scrolling down the blue bubbles. Sada, Treaty AM. I've been sitting on the floor at JFK for 4 hours. 1:35 a.m. Port Authority tried to trespass me. I told them to arrest me. I didn't leave. 1:40 a.m. I bought a first-class ticket for the next flight to Vienna. Austrian OS 89. It takes off tomorrow at 3 p.m. 1:45 a.m. I know you're on this flight. I know you're reading this. It's fine if you don't answer right now. I'm coming to find you. Harper's finger stopped dead. The next flight. He bought a ticket. She tapped back to the main menu and opened her other texts. Sterling's thread from right after the post went viral was sitting there. She read from the beginning. 7:03 p.m. Less than 10 minutes after she powered off. Harper, what the actual F times K is the meaning of that Instagram post? Explain yourself right now. Did Hayes send you that photo? Did you pay him off? How long have you been stalking me? 7:20 p.m. I've left the hospital. I'm speeding to JFK. Your phone is going straight to voicemail. You're doing this just to humiliate me, aren't you? The tone shifted drastically an hour later. 2:15 p.m. Harper, let's just talk like adults. Don't get on a plane. It's been 3 years. You can't just blow up my company and leave without a single word. You have to at least give me the basic respect of a face-to-face conversation. I know I screwed up. I know I'm a bastard. But this is insane. You can't just execute me publicly and not give me a chance to apologize. Harper, are you reading these? Please. You can't do this. Harper quietly locked her phone and picked up her champagne flute, taking a slow, deliberate sip. The vintage champagne was ice cold, the carbonation popping sharply on her tongue, tart, dry, and elegantly sweet. Over the last 3 years, Harper had learned how to tolerate a lot of things. She had learned how to eat a Michelin-quality dinner alone at a massive marble dining table. She had learned how to smile politely while Eleanor Alden criticized her posture at charity galas. She had learned how to maintain a perfectly blank face when a page 6 notification popped up on her phone showing Sterling exiting a club with Sierra. But she had never acquired a taste for heavy drinking. Tonight, however, she discovered she could hold her liquor remarkably well. At least her hand didn't tremble even a millimeter as she read his desperate messages. The phone buzzed against the tray table. A new iMessage, delivered via the aircraft's high-speed Wi-Fi. Sent at 3 a.m. EST. I'm still at the airport. An image file was attached. It slowly loaded over the plane's connection. It was a photo showing the massive glass window of the Terminal 4 departure hall. Outside was the pitch-black tarmac. Reflected in the glass, illuminated by the harsh terminal lights, was the photographer. A man was sitting directly on the hard terrazzo floor, his back leaning heavily against the glass. One long leg bent, the other stretched out. His expensive silk tie was yanked loose, his bespoke collar unbuttoned. The man was Sterling Alden, the billionaire playboy of Wall Street. He was sitting in the exact spot where, hours earlier, he had dropped to his knees. Harper stared at the photograph for a very long time. Her face was entirely unreadable. Then, she performed one simple action. She swiped left on his contact name. Delete thread. Her thumb tapped the red confirmation button without a millisecond of hesitation. The entire history of their digital communication vanished into the ether. The last tether between them was severed as cleanly as a surgical cut. Harper placed her phone face down on the table. She picked up the crystal flute and drank the remaining champagne sip by sip until it was empty. When the flight attendant walked past again, checking the cabin, Harper held up the empty glass and offered a brilliant, genuine smile. "I'll take another glass, please." The flight attendant, slightly surprised by the sudden radiance in the passenger's face, smiled back warmly and nodded. "Right away, Mrs. Alden." Actually, Harper corrected gently. "It's Miss Ellis." The fresh champagne was poured. Harper raised her glass slightly toward the oval window, toward the endless sea of silver clouds. What was she toasting? To the 3 years of searing steaks in a quiet, lonely kitchen. To the anniversary dinner that went straight into the trash. To the private Instagram posts that never received a single like. To the simple sentence he ignored this morning. To the Boeing 777 that was currently carrying her 4,225 miles away across the Atlantic. To the broken man with the crooked tie sitting on the floor of JFK. To the definitive end of an era, and to the beginning of her actual life. The corners of her mouth lifted into a curve that grew and expanded until it became a wide, bright, breathtaking smile. It was a smile she hadn't worn naturally since her wedding day. She smiled, and the corners of her eyes grew a little warm and red. But there were no tears. Not a single drop. Alden Enterprises headquarters, Financial District, Manhattan. Emergency Board of Directors meeting. 4 a.m. The 8-5-story glass monolith should have been completely dark, occupied only by night shift security and custodial crews. But tonight, the top 10 floors were ablaze with fluorescent light. A fleet of black Cadillac Escalades and Lincoln Navigators idled aggressively at the curb out front. The atmosphere inside the 80th floor executive boardroom felt like a pressurized cabin seconds away from a blowout. All 12 senior board members were present. Some wore bespoke suits they had hastily thrown on over t-shirts. Some were literally wearing cashmere sweatpants under expensive overcoats. The crystal ashtray in front of an old-school director was already piled high with chewed cigars, completely ignoring the building's strict smoking ban. But no one was talking. They were all waiting in terrified silence for two specific people. The first was Richard Alden, the ruthless founder and chairman of Alden Enterprises, Sterling's father. According to his chief of staff, the chairman's blood pressure had spiked to stroke-level numbers the exact minute the stock began to aggressively dump in after-hours trading. He had been rushed in an ambulance to New York Presbyterian and had not yet been medically cleared. The second was Sterling Alden, the CEO, the golden boy, and the sole architect of this multi-billion-dollar disaster. And he was completely MIA. The heavy frosted glass boardroom doors swung open. Everyone instinctively sat up straighter. It wasn't Sterling. It was Eleanor Alden. She had left the hospital and changed out of her Carolina Herrera suit into a stark, intimidating black Armani power suit. Her lipstick was a dark, bruised crimson. There were visible, exhausted shadows under her eyes that even the most expensive La Mer concealer couldn't mask, but her posture was rigid, and her gaze was absolute steel. Two senior legal associates followed closely behind her, carrying thick, leather-bound briefing binders. Eleanor bypassed the empty CEO chair and walked directly to the absolute head of the massive mahogany table, Richard Alden's seat. She stood firmly behind it, placed both hands flat on the polished wood, and swept her terrifying gaze over the room of powerful men and women. The chairman is still under medical observation at the hospital. I will be presiding over this crisis meeting, she announced. Her voice didn't invite debate. No one dared object. Eleanor Alden was no mere trophy wife. She was a Wharton graduate who had ruthlessly helped build this corporate empire with Richard from the ground up in the ADS. Let's start with the immediate bleeding. The stock price, she began, her voice devoid of any human emotion. As of 7:03 p.m. last evening, exactly 16 minutes after my daughter-in-law's Instagram post went live, institutional algorithms began dumping ALDN stock. As of the after-hours market close 30 minutes ago, Alden Enterprises has lost roughly $5.2 billion in market capitalization. The air in the room was sucked out. Men loosened their ties. $5 billion erased in 3 hours. Next, the optics and public opinion, she continued, snatching a printed dossier from her legal associate. Of the top 10 trending topics on X nationally, 6 are directly related to our ticker symbol. We are the #1 trending story on TikTok, Instagram, and Reddit. The morning talk shows are currently rewriting their scripts to cover this at 7 a.m. She threw the dossier onto the table with a loud smack. In 40 years of cutthroat business, Alden Enterprises has survived antitrust lawsuits and market crashes. But we have never been a tabloid joke. The chief marketing officer, a nervous man in his 50s, cleared his throat. Madam Vice Chair, our immediate priority must be aggressive crisis management. I propose we issue a press release immediately, drafted by our external PR firm, claiming the photos are deepfakes, or at least heavily doctored, and threaten legal action against the media outlets running them. The photos are authentic. Eleanor cut him off, her voice cracking like a whip. The CMO immediately shut his mouth. The security stills from the baccarat are real. The Porsche dashcam footage is real. The paternity chart is real. The photo of my idiot son pacing outside the delivery room is completely real. It is all Sterling's reckless handiwork. Her voice was terrifyingly calm, but venomous. So, do not waste my time drafting a denial. A denial will be instantly debunked by the internet and make us look incompetent. What we need to do before the opening bell is not deny, but strategically separate. Separate? A senior board member asked, leaning forward. How? A two-front war. Eleanor held up 2 manicured fingers. First, we establish an impenetrable firewall between Sterling Alden's personal indiscretions and the operational integrity of Alden Enterprises. Effective immediately, at 6 a.m., we will issue an SEC filing and a press release announcing the board has voted to suspend Sterling from all duties as CEO, pending an internal review. I will assume the role of interim CEO. We will hire an independent auditing firm to investigate any commingling of his personal expenses with company accounts to satisfy the shareholders. She paused, letting the reality of ousting her own son sink in. Second, Sierra Layton. She practically spat the name. I want every single piece of dirt, every NDA, every lawsuit regarding that influencer leaked to the press immediately. Our corporate intelligence team already has the files. Hand them over to TMZ, page 6, and the Daily Mail anonymously. We don't even have to spin a narrative. The internet is already tearing her apart. Our objective is to violently shift the media's hyper-focus from Alden Enterprises to the Mistress. The head of HR hesitated. Eleanor, isn't that exposing the company to a massive defamation or intentional infliction of emotional distress suit? The woman just gave birth. Eleanor shot him a look so cold it could freeze water. The child she birthed may possess Alden DNA, but I did not invite her to open her legs. She chose to play a high-stakes game. She must accept the catastrophic consequences of losing it. No one else dared speak a word of dissent. Just as Eleanor was about to continue outlining the PR strategy, the boardroom doors flew open again. This time, everyone at the table scrambled to their feet. It was Richard Alden. He wasn't in a wheelchair, nor was he being physically supported by his security detail. He was wearing a standard-issue New York Presbyterian hospital gown with a heavy, charcoal gray Loro Piana cashmere overcoat draped awkwardly over his shoulders. A piece of medical tape still secured a piece of gauze to the back of his left hand where the IV had been hastily ripped out. His face was a terrifying shade of gray, his lips bloodless, but his eyes burned with a manic, furious light. His personal cardiologist, wearing a white coat, trailed nervously behind him, pleading in a hushed tone. "Mr. Chairman, please. Your systolic pressure is highly unstable. If you suffer another spike, it could trigger a massive cardiac event. You cannot be out of bed." Richard Alden stopped walking, turned his head slightly, and said exactly 2 words. "Get out." The highly paid cardiologist wisely stopped, took a step back, and retreated into the hallway, pulling the door shut. Richard walked slowly, painfully, to the head of the table. Eleanor silently stepped aside, yielding the throne. He gripped the arms of the leather chair and slowly lowered himself into it. Everyone else around the table followed suit, sitting back down in total silence. Richard's bloodshot gaze slowly scanned the perimeter of the room, finally locking dead onto the one empty chair at the table. The CEO's chair. Sterling's chair. "Where is my son?" His voice was a raspy growl. No one answered. They all looked at their legal pads. I asked a question. "Where the hell is Sterling?" Eleanor placed a hand on his shoulder and replied in a measured voice. "We can't get a hold of him, Richard. His phone was destroyed at the hospital, and the GPS tracker on his Panamera was disabled when it was impounded at JFK. Mr. Hayes called on a burner line. A junior VP mumbled nervously. He said the last time he saw Mr. Alden was sitting on the floor at Terminal 4. Around 2 a.m. "The airport?" Richard repeated the word slowly, tasting it. Then he let out a dry, grating laugh that sounded like sandpaper rubbing together. "Outstanding. Truly outstanding. My heir, the CEO of Alden Enterprises, is sitting on the floor of a public airport crying over a woman, broadcast live on TikTok to the entire global market. $5 billion. 40 years of blood, sweat, and cutthroat acquisitions. He knelt on the floor for 3 minutes and incinerated $5 billion. He suddenly raised his fist and slammed it down onto the heavy wooden table with terrifying force. A crystal water carafe jumped and tipped over, water spilling across the polished grain. "Find him! Deploy corporate security. Hire private investigators. I don't care. Drag his pathetic ass back to this building in zip ties if you have to," Richard roared, spittle flying from his lips. "If I find out he boarded a plane to Europe to chase after that woman..." Before he could finish the threat, his eyes rolled back slightly, and his massive body swayed violently to the left. Eleanor gasped and rushed to support his weight. Richard's hand gripped the edge of the mahogany table, his knuckles turning pure white as he tried to ground himself. His lips trembled uncontrollably, and the remaining color drained from his face at a visible, alarming rate. He slumped sideways in the chair. "Richard!" Eleanor's composed corporate mask completely shattered, her voice shrill with genuine panic. "Call 911! Get the medics back in here now!" The boardroom erupted into total chaos. The cardiologist rushed back in through the doors, followed seconds later by building paramedics pushing a crash cart. The executives scrambled out of the way. The room instantly transformed from a corporate war room into an emergency trauma bay. The portable EKG monitor began emitting a rapid, shrill warning tone, and Sterling Alden, the man whose actions had single-handedly triggered this absolute collapse, was currently sitting on the cold floor of a JFK concourse, his back pressed against the glass window. In his suit jacket pocket, He clutched a first-class ticket to Vienna. The flight was scheduled for 3 p.m. that afternoon. 10 hours to go. He didn't know his father was currently crashing on the boardroom floor. He didn't know his mother was aggressively orchestrating a hostile takeover of his CEO title to save the stock. And he certainly didn't know that Harper had already permanently deleted their text thread over the Atlantic Ocean. He only knew one thing with absolute, blinding certainty. He had to find her. He had to fly across the world and stand in front of her, even if it meant getting on his knees again. Mount Sinai. VIP wing. VC. A. M. A. S. T. The New York skyline outside the hospital window was still a dark, bruised navy blue. Sierra Layton was wide awake. She had been lying completely motionless in this exact position all night. After Eleanor Alden's security team had legally kidnapped her newborn, Sierra had screamed until her throat bled, cried until she dry-heaved, and physically destroyed the monitors in her room. A resident nurse had eventually rushed in with an attending physician and injected a heavy dose of Ativan into her IV line to prevent a psychological break. But after the sedative began to wear off, she didn't make another sound. She just lay there, staring at the ceiling, resembling a breathing corpse. Her phone was back in her trembling hand, the harsh blue light from the OLED screen illuminating her ghastly, tear-stained face. Her eyes were completely dry now, not a single tear left to shed. She was scrolling through the X trending topics. The entire internet was executing her. The hashtag number Sierra Layton Exposed had climbed to number 3 nationally. Someone on Reddit had pulled the heavily redacted lawsuit documents from 10 years ago regarding the Silicon Valley billionaire. A TikTok creator had dug up old, blurry club photos of her with the Miami real estate developer. A gossip blog had even managed to illegally source the hospital records from when she had given birth to her first child in California, posting a blurred screenshot of the birth certificate. The name in the father field was blank, but the dates proved it wasn't Sterling Alden. It was all 100% true. Every single skeleton she had spent a decade desperately burying under NDAs and hush money had been violently unearthed and put on display in a single, devastating night. Sierra's perfectly manicured finger swiped slowly over the screen. She read every cruel comment, every meme, every death threat. Expressionless. Then, she closed the app, opened her contacts, and made a call. It rang for a very long time before it was finally answered by a groggy, highly irritated male voice. Hello? Who is this? Mr. Carlson, a notoriously ruthless Manhattan divorce and celebrity scandal attorney, barked into the receiver. Sierra's voice was hoarse, raspy, but terrifyingly calm. It's me, Sierra Layton. There was a 3-second silence on the other end, followed by the sound of rustling bedsheets. Miss Layton, are you aware it is 5 in the damn morning? I am. Sierra's gaze remained deadlocked on the ceiling, but my newborn infant was just forcibly abducted from my hospital room by Eleanor Alden's private security, and my entire life's history has been dragged through the absolute mud all over the internet for the last 10 hours. Do you honestly think I can afford to wait until normal business hours to make this phone call? Carlson let out a heavy sigh, the sound of a lighter flicking echoing through the speaker. I've seen the news. My phone has been blowing up since midnight. The trending topics are a bloodbath. What exactly do you want me to do about it? 3 things. Sierra's voice sounded like a dull knife, grinding rhythmically against a wet stone. First, I want you to file an emergency injunction and sue Alden Enterprises for child abduction and severe emotional distress. I physically birthed that child. Until a court-ordered DNA test proves Sterling's paternity, Eleanor Alden has absolutely zero legal standing to remove him from my custody. The entire sequence of her storming my VIP suite with armed guards and physically taking the baby is fully recorded on the hospital's interior security cameras, and the floor nurses are eyewitnesses. We will win that injunction in front of a judge by noon. Carlson was suddenly typing rapidly on a keyboard on the other end. Okay. What else? Second, I want you to file a civil suit against Sterling Alden for fraudulent inducement to marry, breach of verbal contract, and demand massive palimony. Our intimate relationship spanned over 3 years. I have a digital mountain of evidence, iMessages, offshore wire transfers to my LLC, hotel logs, recorded phone calls. This wasn't just a brief, casual affair. Under New York civil precedent, this was a long-term, stable cohabitation outside of wedlock, based on his explicit promises to leave his wife. We have more than sufficient grounds to freeze his assets. Carlson stopped typing. The clicking ceased. Miss Layton, take a breath. Are you absolutely certain you want to go nuclear? Once I file these motions in open court, there is zero turning back. You can't unring this bell. And given the PR nightmare they are currently facing, the Alden family will deploy a legal team that costs more than a small country's GDP to crush you into dust. I know. And third, Sierra cut him off sharply, completely ignoring the warning. I will be demanding exactly 10% of Sterling Alden's personal voting shares in Alden Enterprises to be placed in an irrevocable trust as child support. If their lawyers refuse or try to stall, I will personally FedEx a swab of my son's DNA to the science desk of the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and CNN, and let the entire world know that the heir to the Alden Empire is a bastard child they illegally kidnapped in the middle of the night. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. When Attorney Carlson finally spoke again, his voice was tight with disbelief. Miss Layton, do you have any concept of what 10% of Sterling's personal ALDN shares is currently worth, even with the stock crashing? At the current depressed market cap, it's roughly $2.8 billion. Sierra replied, her tone as casual and flat as if she were ordering an iced latte. You're clinically insane. They will bury you. Sierra laughed, a horrific, grating sound that made Carlson physically wince. Mr. Carlson, do you want to know exactly what I sacrificed for Sterling Alden? I met him at a country club when I was 15. We started hooking up at 20, and I got pregnant with his first child at 22. He sat in his Porsche and told me, Sierra, just lay low, let me handle my father, and I'll come back and put a ring on it. Her chilling laughter abruptly stopped, so I aborted the pregnancy to protect his reputation. And I waited. I waited until his father shipped him off to manage the London office, and when he finally came back to New York, he had Harper Ellis on his arm, flashing a 5-carat diamond. Do you have any idea what that does to a person's psyche? To watch the billionaire you've invested a decade of your youth into marry a boring, plain Jane heiress for a corporate merger? Carlson remained silently on the line. Then, he came crawling back to my apartment. Sierra's voice dropped to a venomous whisper. He swore he didn't love Harper. He said she was a frigid arranged marriage to appease the board. He told me I was the only woman who actually excited him. And like a desperate idiot, I believed him. I gave him another 3 years of my absolute prime. I waited in the shadows for 3 more years. Her tone shifted, hardening into pure ice. And now, I have finally delivered his male heir. His boring legal wife has publicly castrated him and skipped the country. And his psychopath of a mother has barged in and physically stolen my baby. And Sterling? He's sitting at JFK buying a first-class ticket to Europe to beg his wife for forgiveness. Sierra closed her eyes, a fresh wave of adrenaline coursing through her exhausted veins. 10 years. Mr. Carlson. The ultimate return on my 10-year investment was him dropping to his knees on a dirty airport floor crying over another woman. Do you really think I give a single damn about no turning back anymore? I want to burn his life to the ground. A long, heavy sigh came through the phone speaker. I understand perfectly. I've recorded your 3 demands. I'll instruct my paralegals to draft the emergency complaints immediately. We'll have them filed at the courthouse before the lunch recess. But Miss Layton, I have to warn you legally, once these 3 massive lawsuits hit the public docket simultaneously, public opinion might turn even more violently against you. You will be seen as an extortionist. I don't care, Sierra snapped. She hung up the phone. The VIP hospital room descended back into silence. Sierra pushed the blanket aside and swung her legs over the edge of the bed. A searing, tearing pain shot through her lower abdomen. She gritted her teeth, a fresh bead of cold sweat breaking out on her forehead, and forced herself to stand up. She limped slowly to the large window, grabbed the cord, and yanked the heavy blackout curtains open. The very first, pale light of dawn was breaking over the jagged Manhattan skyline, casting a cold blue hue over Central Park. Her cracked lips twisted into a strange, terrifyingly calm curve. Sterling Alden. She whispered to the glass, her breath fogging it slightly. You want to fly across the world to win Harper back? Fine. Let's see if you still have the financial resources or the mental energy to chase her after you've been served with a $3 billion lawsuit. She leaned her forehead against the cold window pane. The first rays of morning sunlight hit her pale face. Harper, she said quietly into the empty room. You really thought you could just press post, destroy my life, and walk away clean to start over. But you forgot one crucial thing about New York. She smiled, a shark-like grin. Even a reputation in absolute tatters can be bought and stitched back together if you extract enough capital. When you eventually crawl back from Europe, we'll see exactly who has the last laugh. Vienna International Airport. Austria. 8 a.m. Local time, Chet. Austrian Airlines flight OS-88 landed smoothly on the European tarmac. Outside the window, Vienna was just waking up. The runway lights blurred beautifully in a light, romantic morning mist. Harper Alden walked out of the jet bridge carrying only a sleek, leather weekend bag. The air inside the terminal was crisp, a little damp, and smelled faintly of dark roasted coffee and fresh-baked pastries. An elderly man in the arrivals hall was quietly playing a classical waltz on an accordion. This was the authentic, unbothered rhythm of a real life, and for the first time in 3 years, it belonged entirely to her. She hailed a Mercedes taxi outside the terminal. The driver easily understood her basic German and pulled out onto the highway, heading directly toward the address she had provided. The grand imperial architecture of the city began to emerge from the golden morning mist as they crossed the Danube River. This was it. The taxi came to a smooth stop in front of a stunning, historic Altbau apartment building in the Innere Stadt, Vienna's upscale first district. She had quietly purchased the property 4 months ago through a shell corporation managed by Miss Whitmore, a top-floor flat with high ceilings, ornate crown molding, and a small wrought-iron balcony from which you could clearly see the Gothic spire of St. Stephen's Cathedral. When she signed the wire transfer, she hadn't been entirely sure she would ever actually need to use it, but she had bought it anyway. An insurance policy. An escape hatch from the Alden Empire. The apartment was modestly sized but impeccably appointed. Crisp white walls, original herringbone hardwood floors, and tall French doors leading out to the balcony. The minimalist, modern furniture she had ordered online weeks ago was already assembled and in place. A soft gray linen sofa, a small oak dining table, a high-end espresso machine gleaming on the marble kitchen counter. Everything was completely ready. A blank canvas. Harper dropped her bag, walked straight to the French doors, pushed them open, and stepped out onto the balcony. She breathed in deeply. The historic city of Vienna lay at her feet. Red-tiled roofs, cream-colored Baroque facades. The heavy, resonant bells of St. Stephen's Cathedral began to chime, echoing across the cobblestone streets. 8 o'clock. A new city, a new time zone, a totally new version of herself. Her iPhone vibrated in her coat pocket. She pulled it out. A secure signal message from Miss Whitmore. "You've landed." Harper typed back swiftly. "Yes. I'm at the apartment." Another message came through immediately. Update on the fallout. Alden Enterprises lost $5.2 billion in market cap before the bell. Richard Alden suffered a major cardiac event at the emergency board meeting. He is in the ICU. Eleanor Alden has seized control as interim CEO. Sterling has been officially suspended by the board. Sierra Layton was discharged this morning and has hired a shark attorney. She is preparing to sue for palimony and child abduction. Harper read the sterile, bulleted list of absolute destruction and felt nothing. No guilt. No triumph. Just a profound, quiet detachment. She didn't reply to the update. Another message popped up. Sterling Alden purchased a ticket for flight OS 89. He is currently in the air. He is scheduled to land in Vienna tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. local time. Harper stared at that specific message for a long time. She leaned against the cold iron railing. Then, she typed slowly. What difference does it make if he comes to Austria, Miss Whitmore? Miss Whitmore. He will violently demand to see you. He might cause a scene. Harper smiled faintly at the screen. Let him. Let him fly across the Atlantic. Let him track me down. Let him stand in front of my door and exhaust himself saying every single thing he wants to say. She paused, taking a deep breath of the misty air. Then continued typing. And then, I will peacefully close the door in his face. Miss Whitmore sent back a simple thumbs-up emoji. Harper locked her phone, slid it into her pocket, and walked back inside the warm apartment. She quickly unpacked her meager belongings, a few comfortable cashmere sweaters, a pair of casual walking sneakers, her U.S. passport, a new international debit card, and the heavy manila envelope she had carried from New York. Inside the envelope was the fully executed divorce settlement agreement, notarized asset transfer documents, and certified proof of ownership of 15% of Sterling's personal voting shares in Alden Enterprises. A quiet clause she had brilliantly negotiated into their ironclad prenup in the event of documented infidelity. She walked into the master bedroom, placed the thick envelope into the wall safe hidden behind a mirror, and punched in a new digital combination. 0315. March 15th. Their wedding anniversary. And the day she finally walked away. Her phone suddenly rang. A live, incoming cellular call. Not an app notification. The caller ID glowed brightly. Sterling Alden. She stood in the center of the quiet bedroom and just watched it ring. She didn't press decline, but she made no move to answer it. It rang a dozen times, the sound bouncing off the hardwood floors, before finally going to voicemail. 10 seconds later, it started ringing again. And again, on the 5th consecutive try, it finally stopped. A standard SMS text message came through immediately. I'm boarding the plane at JFK. I'll be in Vienna tomorrow morning. It's fine if you don't want to see me right now. I will find you. Harper didn't respond. She walked into the kitchen, turned on the espresso machine, and pulled a shot of dark roast. She took a sip. It was piping hot and aggressively bitter. She hadn't added a grain of sugar or a drop of milk, but as she looked out the window at the Austrian skyline, she smiled. Vienna, Austria. The next morning, 9:15 a.m. Sterling Alden was the very first person to step off the plane. He had utilized the first-class lavatory to clean up. He had changed out of his ruined suit into a thick black cashmere turtleneck, dark tailored trousers, and a heavy navy wool topcoat to fight the European chill. He had shaved his jawline clean. His hair was meticulously combed back. To the untrained eye, he looked like a wealthy American tourist or a traveling diplomat, not the broken wreck who had dropped to his knees at JFK. But his eyes gave him away completely. They were still severely bloodshot, ringed with deep, bruised shadows. He hadn't slept a single minute in the last 24 hours. Every time he closed his eyes in the lie-flat pod, he saw Harper's back in their kitchen. He saw the folder of her ignored, heartbreaking Finsta posts. He saw her thumb casually pressing share. He knew only one thing with absolute certainty. He could not accept a divorce. He had to get his wife back, no matter what it cost him financially or personally. He marched through customs, bypassed baggage claim, and handed a taxi driver a slip of paper with an address in the Innere Stadt. An address he had spent his entire flight leveraging Alden Enterprises' massive cybersecurity retainer to illegally pry from Miss Plode Whitmore's secure server logs. The taxi navigated the narrow, cobblestone streets and came to a stop. Sterling threw a €50 note at the driver and got out. Looking up at the historic facade of the 6-story building, he counted up to the top floor. He could clearly see a white ceramic flower box resting on a wrought iron balcony. The French doors were closed tight against the morning chill. The sheer linen curtains drawn half shut. No warm lights were visible inside. She was in there. His gut screamed it. He pushed past the heavy oak front door of the building and began climbing the winding, carpeted staircase, his chest tight, his every step feeling like he was walking through wet cement. He reached the 6th-floor landing and stood before the pristine white wooden door. Unit 6B. He raised his fist and knocked firmly. No answer. The hallway was dead silent. He knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. His hand began to shake, not from the brisk ambient temperature of the stairwell, but from a deep, paralyzing fear. Fear that she had already left the country, and an even greater, suffocating fear that she was standing right on the other side of the wood, and she was simply choosing not to open it. He pulled out his phone and dialed her number. Through the thick door, he heard the faint, muffled vibration of a phone ringing. It wasn't turned off. It wasn't on Do Not Disturb. It rang out loud. And then, the ringing abruptly stopped. She had picked up. Silence on the line. But through the speaker, he could hear her breathing soft, even perfectly calm. Harper. His voice was a raw, desperate whisper, echoing in the empty stairwell. It's me. I'm standing right outside your door. Silence. I know you're in there. Please, Harper, just open the door. Let's just talk face to face. Just for 5 minutes. After we talk, if you look me in the eye and tell me you still want me to leave, I'll get back in a cab and go to the airport. Finally, a physical sound from the other side of the door. Not her voice, but the soft pad of footsteps. Light footsteps moving across the hardwood floor, getting closer, stopping exactly behind the heavy door. And then, a small brass peephole cover set in the center of the door slid open with a soft click. Harper's dark eyes appeared behind the thick glass lens. They were completely calm. Not an angry, fiery calm, but a true, deep, lake-like serenity that terrified him more than screaming ever could. She looked at him through the distorted glass for 3 long seconds. Then, she slid the brass cover shut. Click. From start to finish. She hadn't spoken a single syllable. Sterling's legs gave out slightly. He braced his forearms against the doorframe, leaning his forehead heavily against the cool, painted wood. Harper, please. I'm begging you. Just listen to me. Her voice finally came clearly through the wood, light, crisp, and devoid of any emotion. Mr. Alden. He snapped to attention, pressing his ear to the door. I'm here. I'm listening. 3 years ago, on March 15th, I stood at an altar in the Hamptons and married you. Her voice was perfectly even, as if she were reading a dull weather report. That day, I wore a custom Vera Wang gown that took 6 months to tailor. When the priest told you to lift my veil, the first name you accidentally whispered under your breath was Sierra. Sterling's breath caught sharply in his throat. It felt like he'd been stabbed. On our wedding night at the plaza, you slept in the adjoining suite. You told me you were exhausted from the reception. I thought you were just stressed. I later checked the phone records. You were on a call with Sierra for 2.5 hours. Harper, stop, please. On our first anniversary, I spent all day cooking. You texted me saying you were trapped at the office dealing with an SEC audit. A week later, I checked the dashcam footage from your Panamera that Hayes thought he deleted. You parked at Sierra's loft in Tribeca and didn't leave until 6 a.m. I said stop. Sterling slammed his palm flat against the door, his voice cracking. On our 3rd anniversary, her voice remained perfectly steady, entirely unaffected by his outburst. That is to say, 2 days ago. I was in our kitchen searing dry-aged ribeye. You walked past me to the private elevator. I asked, Will you be home for dinner? You said. I have a meeting. I said. It's our anniversary, Sterling. She paused. You didn't hear me, did you? I heard you, he choked out, hot tears finally spilling over his eyelashes and tracking down his jaw. I heard you. A soft, genuinely amused laugh came from behind the door. The sound pierced his eardrum like an ice pick. You heard me. And you got in the elevator anyway. The European stairwell fell into a suffocating silence. Sterling leaned his entire body weight against the door, his broad shoulders shaking uncontrollably. I am so incredibly sorry. His voice was a strangled, pathetic rasp. Harper, I am so sorry. No response. I was arrogant. I was wrong. I treated you like garbage every single day for 3 years. But please, I am begging you, just give me one more chance. Let me fix this. Just one. A chance for what, exactly? Her voice was suddenly much closer, as if she had leaned her face right up against the wood. Mr. Alden, what kind of chance are you actually asking for? For me to forgive you? To pack my bags, fly back to New York with you, and issue a joint statement? To go back to smiling for the cameras and being the obedient Mrs. Alden? Sterling opened his mouth eagerly. I'll transfer all my voting shares into your name. I'll cut Sierra off completely, she won't get a dime. I'll step down as CEO. We can move to London, we can. What could you possibly do? Her voice, still crystal clear, was now as sharp and cold as a razor blade. Can you mathematically erase 3 years of total neglect? Can you uncook all the dinners I ate alone at that massive table? Can you build a time machine so I never posted those Instagram updates you never once bothered to look at? Her voice rose in volume just a fraction of an inch, but that tiny shift carried more devastating impact than a screaming match. Mr. Alden, I posted 27 times on that private account. All of them about you. Did you ever like a single one? Did you ever leave a comment? You didn't even know the account existed until 2 nights ago, when Mr. Hayes showed you my ghost after I had already crossed the Atlantic. That is not genuine regret, Mr. Alden. That is just the pathetic panic of a man who finally got caught. Her tone instantly snapped back to its placid, detached state. Sterling's hands slid slowly down the smooth surface of the door, his fingernails scratching against the paint. He stood there, head bowed, completely broken, looking like an uprooted tree that had finally crashed to the earth. He heard her footsteps again, backing away from the door, moving deeper into the apartment. Harper! He aggressively slammed his fist against the door, rattling the frame. What do I have to do? Tell me what I have to do for you to just open this door. The footsteps stopped abruptly in the hallway. After a long, agonizing moment, her voice carried back from deep within the Austrian flat. Just one final sentence. Even a stray dog wouldn't return to a home like that. The footsteps resumed, lighter this time, fading completely into the ambient silence of the apartment. Sterling stood completely motionless outside the white door. The crisp, early morning light of Vienna streamed through a small, arched, stained glass window in the stairwell, falling directly across his face. Outside, the historic city was fully waking up. Cafes opening, trams running, but Sterling's world had just gone completely, permanently dark. His phone violently vibrated in his topcoat pocket. A call from Mr. Hayes. He pulled it out and answered mechanically, his voice a hollow, dead thing. What is it? Mr. Hayes's voice on the other end was frantic, practically hyperventilating. Sir. An emergency summons just arrived at corporate via courier. Sierra Layton's attorney filed a massive lawsuit against you for fraudulent inducement and palimony, and a judge just granted an injunction to temporarily freeze all your personal shares in the company. The board is officially voting to terminate your employment at noon. You have to get on a plane and come back to New York immediately. Sterling stood frozen, the phone pressed to his ear. He slowly turned his head and gave the closed, white wooden door one last, devastatingly long look. Then, he ended the call, turned on his heel, and walked slowly down the winding stairs, disappearing into the shadows. Up on the sixth-floor balcony, Harper Alden stood wrapped in a warm cashmere sweater, a fresh cup of black espresso resting in her hand. She leaned over the wrought iron railing and watched the back of the man in the heavy navy topcoat exit the building, step onto the cobblestone street, hail a passing taxi at the corner, and completely disappear into the morning traffic. She took a sip of her espresso. Still hot, still aggressively bitter. She pulled her iPhone from her pocket, opened her contacts list, and typed his name into the search bar. Sterling Alden. She scrolled down to the bottom of the contact card. 3 simple taps on the glass screen. Delete contact. Confirm. The name completely vanished, leaving a blank screen. Without a second thought, she tossed the expensive iPhone directly into the wet soil of the white ceramic flower box in the corner of the balcony, leaving it buried. She walked back inside the warm apartment. She slipped on a pair of comfortable Veja sneakers, grabbed her apartment keys and a few euro notes, and walked out the door, locking it firmly behind her. She walked down the winding staircase and stepped out onto the vibrant streets of Vienna. She walked a block over to a small, bustling local bakery. The woman behind the counter smiled warmly and handed her a fresh, warm Apfelstrudel wrapped in paper. Harper stepped out onto the sidewalk and took a large bite. The flaky pastry crust shattered beautifully in her mouth. It was warm, soft, and incredibly sweet with cinnamon and apples. Chewing happily, she adjusted her coat, turned her face up to the morning sun, and walked away into the bustling Austrian morning. Behind her, the small brass bell on the bakery door chimed a bright, clear sound, like a warm welcome. A sound exactly like a brand new story finally beginning. A new story finally beginning.